The UN estimates that by 2050 there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish.
It's estimated that 100 million tons of plastic are generated globally each year.
Local authorities have been forced to close beaches due to mounds of plastic rubbish.
Hello, I'm Tammy Ven Dange, an executive turned social entrepreneur. It's clear that Mother Nature has a plastics problem, but I think it's time to quit talking about the problem. Instead, let's talk about the solutions. This is a business podcast with an environmental mission. And as your host of the Plastics Revolution, I'm going to chat with the innovators, change makers, and fellow entrepreneurs who are leading the way in fighting plastic waste. Along the way, we'll also share tips and practical ideas so that you too can be part of the solution. This is the Plastics Revolution. In this episode of Plastics Revolution, I chat with John Williams of Alliance Paper, a manufacturer of various paper products and a distributor of food-grade biopackaging material. John's been in the printing industry all his life, and in recent years, he's driven the business's focus on creating better products from both an environmental and health perspective. We talked about business, his thoughts about the paper industry, and even the impact of the current COVID-19 crisis. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Plastics Revolution with John Williams of Alliance Paper. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I first became interested in your company when I was reading about Planet Ark's endorsement of your Roller Wrap product. First of all, can you tell us a little bit about what that product is?
It's actually a substitute for conventional food-grade wraps. Obviously, people are using products that they've had for many, many years. And during a process about 4 years ago when we were travelling overseas and looking at alternative paper products for our converting business, we came across a product that had been developed but hadn't actually been commercialised with a mill in Europe, a paper mill. And in discussion with them, it became very obvious that they had a very good product. They had a unique product that was being manufactured using some quite specialised resources and raw materials, but it hadn't really been developed in the marketplace. And the Rolo Wrap brand is a brand that we developed as we commercialised that product of theirs and launched it here in Australia. And we were delighted to get involved with Planet Ark. It was a series of ongoing discussions, but very quickly became apparent that there was something quite different about what our product could do and their alignment with us. So it's quite exciting.
So how do you actually use Roller Wrap?
Roller Wrap is a range of paper products that are made from virgin pulp grown specifically for trees for application into this particular product. And it's coated with a range of vegetable starches. And those starches and the way they're physically coated onto the paper is quite unique. What that means is that we then have a product that can be applied across food packaging, bag making, sandwich wrapping, pretty much any application where a conventional chemically coated paper might be used. And that's probably the single biggest difference between the Rolo Wrap range and any of the other products, or many of the other products that are out there on the market now. So there's no chemical coating. It's actually using natural vegetable starches. And what that means is that not only is it biodegradable, but it's also completely natural and it will compost.
So is this like wax paper that you might use when you're baking something?
Well, you can use it for baking applications. It is quite applicable to, say, putting down underneath a roast or underneath some cookies or something along those lines in an oven application. But it's just as happy going into the microwave or going around the kids' lunches, for argument's sake. So the product itself, there is no wax. Wax products are a petrochemical base invariably. So whilst there can be natural beeswax products, and they're quite expensive to secure now for food wrapping, and they can be washed and reused, and that's a great product option, but they are expensive and they're not necessarily commercially realistic. Wax paper, as we know it now, predominantly tends to be a chemical coat that's petrochemical based.
Can the average consumer purchase your product, or is it mostly just focused on like the restaurant and cafes?
No, the product that is currently, the distribution program is now being developed and launched more broadly in Australia. It's taken some time to set those things in place. Obviously, the current circumstance makes it a little difficult for, I guess, some of the one-on-one and the face-to-face communication that's involved in these processes. But we now have this product available online through online store. It's available through our own online shop, Alliance Paper, and there's a series of endorsements, obviously, that sit behind it with some of the other products in the groups supported by Planet Ark.
Ah, fantastic. I could think of at least one cafe locally that would be very interested in your products. When we talk about commercializing an idea that you found overseas, what exactly did you have to do to make it a feasible product to sell here locally?
The first thing was to really understand what was unique about the product and why it would actually present as a point of difference. I think there's a lot of people out there, there's a lot of people in business, there's a lot of people in the home environment, mums and dads, and commercial catering applications that are familiar with and constantly using plastic. But more and more now they're becoming realistic about the fact that that product isn't perhaps as good or as healthy for the environment or even for their own application as they perhaps might like to think it could be or should be. And so when we looked at that and we started to talk to the people at Planet Ark, it was, where is this product? Why is it different? And where do we take it? It has taken us a lot longer than I would have preferred to have actually physically got the product into market, into a distribution channel. But I'd have to say that there's also been a lot of pushback. People talk, a lot of commercial applications, people talk about wanting to do the right thing by the environment, looking for alternatives, quite prepared to find an alternative. But it's amazing when you take them a product and say, well, this is an alternative to perhaps using plastic or a plastic type application. And the first thing most of them say, well, is we want to be half the price or we're not interested. So working through those things from a commercialisation perspective are actually really quite important and fundamental to building a base as to where you can start from and how you can then grow it. It's a long process that unfortunately, even though there's a lot of energy at the moment around change and a need for change and about sustainability, and it's become quite the focus, people still take time to make change.
Yeah. When we talk about paper, specifically from a recycling perspective, I know where my parents live in the United States, they're no longer recycling paper. They'll take cardboard, but they won't take paper. And while here in Australia, most councils will still allow paper recycling, is this particular product that you have, I know it's compostable, but can it be recycled as well?
Yes. Because there is no chemical as such, no polypropylene coatings, no poly applications to the paper, it will recycle.
Great.
Paper coated with natural starches will break down. Biodegradability is not a word that everyone's particularly comfortable with from a point of view of the standards around recyclability. And it's probably a buzzword that's got a lot of noise for a lot of wrong reasons over a period of time. But the simple fact is that paper is made from natural product. It can be coated with things that mean that it will not break down as rapidly. Packaging these days has become so requiring of vivid brightness, reflective applications, heavy varnishes, etc. Anything that's varnished in a paper product nowadays will not break down, will not compost, and certainly is not recyclable. And that's one of the reasons why so many countries have looked at where they set the standards around that globally. And these are some of the things that we've been looking at as we've been developing these products over the last couple of years.
Well, I was just looking at your website and your Barrier Plus product. I could see that you have coffee cups there, which right now, since most coffee cafe places will not take your reusable cup, it seems like you guys are in a great place right now to extend a recyclable, biodegradable, compostable type of paper product when it's not possible for us to use a reusable one.
You're absolutely correct. The Barrier range, the Plus range, has both a water vapor and a grease and oil capability on it. So as far as water vapor and grease proof capability. So it's also heat sealable. So what that allows us to do is have it applied in multiple applications. We don't make cups. We make rolls of paper. That's really about all from our value add area. But the product is now being applied into specialists that actually do make cups, that do make bags, that do make patty pans, et cetera, bakery items. So there's a massive opportunity for this raw material to be applied across a multiple range of markets and products.
Yeah, well, it'd be really interesting to know after this crazy COVID-19 crisis is over, whether or not there's a huge uptake of these types of products, because it just seems like a logical transition if it's going to be harder to use our reusable cups. So hopefully not. Why don't we talk a little bit more about how you got involved in Alliance Paper? I know you also have Sustain Paper now, but how did you actually get involved in that company? And tell us more about it.
Alliance is a company that's been in business for in excess of 36 years now. It was a family-owned company. I came across the organisation when I was actually running one of our competitors, believe it or not, over in the West. And the business was owned by one individual, and he chose to semi-retire from the operation and put the business up for sale. I got involved in an acquisition that didn't actually transpire the way that we wanted it to, but I formed a good working relationship with Peter, and we've taken from there. He actually resides overseas most of the time, and I operate the business for him here. It's an exciting, thriving business. I think one of our biggest assets is our people and our customers, but there's a great deal of knowledge as well in what it is that we can offer and how we think differently about, I guess, the way a product is used. We've always been, Alliance Paper has been a converter of paper products. So we've made things like thermal rolls for till receipts and still supply probably 65% of the Australian market with that product.
Wow.
But we also have been involved in reselling products for stationery lines and stationery items. So we've had an interesting, always paper-based. And then the progression from there into Sustain Paper and establishing Sustain Paper as a paper wholesaling company was all about being able to take the next step with sustainable products. Let's face it, there's always a life cycle and a time associated with a range of products, like, for argument's sake, thermal paper. But the opportunity to take all that knowledge, that experience, and the resources we've got, the people we've got, and broaden their opportunities and broaden the opportunity in the marketplace by looking at how do we take a new product range and deliver that to market, not necessarily for us to convert or to make into a value-added product, but provide it to companies that are specialists in that space. There's no point in reinventing the wheel. The cost of capital these days, the investment that's required, and the life cycle of products make that a very expensive exercise. But manufacturing needs to be kept in Australia. I think we're probably seeing the knock-on effect of some of those challenges now more than we probably have in the last 15 to 20 years. But we have an opportunity through Alliance and Sustain to provide product to a broader reach of manufacturing companies, both here in Australia, and we are dealing with companies in Asia as well.
Well, I absolutely think that buying Australia is loud and proud at the moment. And hopefully the consumer is willing to recognize that there is going to be a change in price if things are made here just because of fair wages. I want to go back. You did mention your thermal rolls. And for those who aren't familiar with that term, that's basically the receipt paper that comes out of the till or the checkout whenever you're buying something, right? When you use your credit card or you just buy something with cash. I noticed that you guys actually got involved in Planet Art some time ago, and it actually was around this particular product. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
It's funny, Tammy, because it's probably more relevant now than ever before. For many years, as manufacturing has dropped off in Australia and prices have been driven by a benchmark standard against the imported product, Australia's been seeing significant volumes of cheaper products coming into the Australian market from China and the like. And one of the challenges with that product is that there are no standards applied to the way the products are made or converted in Asia. And by and large, what that means is that we wind up having grades of paper used and applied to customer applications in Australia that don't meet the standards. Back in 2019, a significant change was starting to roll out in Europe and across many states in the US, where BPA, which is that lovely plastic, if you like it, simple terms, a plastic bonding product that was used inside cans. It was part of baby formula bottles and drink bottles for some time. And many people may remember the years ago there was a big noise made about the fact that BPA was bad and it had to be banned. Well, it is bad. It's actually quite nasty. It has some very nasty side effects. And as this was becoming more and more of a focus point in Europe, the World Health Organization and the World Bank got behind this program, recognising the impact to human health, and started to focus on phasing out BPA as a supply product line in thermal paper. And BPA is actually bisphenol A, so it's a phenol product. They've now moved to eradicate phenol coatings as well. So as part of our assessment of where the market was heading, we sat down with Planet Ark and talked about what are the risks, what are the issues, and recognised for what Planet Ark's done in Australia and the focus and profile they have, we decided to work with them on launching the BPA-free and the phenol-free range of thermal papers under that banner.
So basically these receipt rolls, as an easier term, had this plastic coating on them, which was BPA specifically. And so it seems like every time that one of us actually took the receipt, or if the cashier was collecting those receipts for their own business purposes, they're touching this BPA every single time.
Yeah.
It has to be horrible for your health.
Well, it is, because there's an absorption factor. BPA is actually a very small molecule, so it's readily and easily absorbed through the skin. And why it's probably even more important right now is that things like moisture and particularly hand sanitizer actually escalates the process of absorption into the body, into the dermal layer. And from there, it's an endocrine inhibitor. So it actually has some nasty side effects not in everybody, but certainly in specific individuals where their metabolism perhaps and endocrine system is more readily attacked. So what occurs is that the absorption rate increases when moist or hand sanitised products, wash products are on hands that come in contact with thermal paper that contains BPA or phenol.
So they've already banned this in Europe.
Yep.
Is it banned here in Australia yet?
That's a very good question, and the short answer is regrettably no.
Wow.
And the best thing that we can do is most of us, all of our customers, are now running BPA and phenol-free products, and many of our customers are phasing out their use of the BPA and moving across to the pure phenol-free. There is obviously a cost impost when you compare it against a benchmark product from China that has no legislation behind it whatsoever. So, once again, Australia's missed out on what would have been perhaps an insulation on this, because we rely on so much that is imported and we don't manufacture as much as we should or could in Australia. Yeah.
But also the health consequences for workers could be potentially high without them even realizing that they're at risk.
Oh, look, it's deeply concerning. When we came across this issue and examined it in detail with the paper mills and many of the individual enterprises in Europe, going back now 2017, we made a decision at a board level at that time and at a senior management level, and we completely re-engineered our workflow within our business so that where we were having contact with this product, we had a capacity to insulate the risk to our staff and personnel. That was the first thing, but then the knock-on effect, of course, is who else is touching it, and it's obviously the customers, it's the users, and it's their end users as well. So we've been working, and Planet Ark have been fantastic in there as part of this, and certainly level of awareness that has been raised. It takes time to roll these things out. It takes time to secure the right product. But again, you've got to have people who are prepared to look and listen and understand the bigger picture, and not just look at what the price difference is, because there is a price impost. From a standard product to a BPA-free is about a 7% variance, and it's about the same when you go to a phenol-free paper. So those numbers are now evening themselves out as the standard product is no longer available, not in Europe, and not through the reliable and recognisable mills.
Yeah. And with import costs right now more than doubling, at least for me, then I imagine that you guys are probably doing okay as far as being competitive for a while.
Well, we obviously have our lead times on these sorts of products are out 6 and 8 months. So we currently have long forward orders, and we manage that process. But pricing on a lot of, currency is the big issue at the moment, and who knows where the world economy is going to settle in the next 3 to 6 months and how long this actually continues. But the main thing is that there is an alternative out there. There has been available for some time, and it's all about making sure that people remain healthy.
Before we roll off, excuse the pun, roll off of the thermal rolls, I also noticed that you're reusing the cores. So tell us more about that. And is Planet Ark also involved in collecting them?
No, the project is endorsed by them as far as supported, but it's an initiative that we developed, and it really came about. It's quite funny actually. It came about from looking at what was happening with good old Nespresso collecting the pods that they make their coffee and supply the coffee in. And the observation, actual fact, it was my wife made the observation, why don't you do something like this with your cores? Now, a core costs a couple of cents. It's not a lot of money. But that core, if it was a cardboard core, it goes into waste. And that won't break down. That'll take 15 to 20 years to break down because of the way a cardboard core is made. It's actually just layers and layers of paper that are glued together. Well, the paper will break down, but not if it's coated in adhesive.
Yeah.
So what we started to look at some years ago was, could we put a plastic core in to replace that now? I use the term plastic as a generic term. We run a recycled material into the cores now. They're a polypropylene. So that product itself is designed from and manufactured from a recycled material, old car parts, if you like, the majority of them. Mm-hmm. And we use it, make it into a roll of paper, and we have established a process whereby customers can send those roll cores back to us. We wash them, prep them, and reuse them.
That's fantastic. It's actually one of the great examples of a true closed loop of taking your products back and being able to do something with them.
It's the circular economy working to perfection, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit more about the business impact of COVID-19, because certainly all businesses and most not-for-profits are being impacted for better or for worse right now. Are you guys being impacted by all the preventative measures and changes?
Oh, look, like all responsible businesses and individuals, we've got a series of procedures in place. We provide product to all Australia's leading supermarket groups and many of the retailers who are still open. We also support financial institutions and medical functions. So as a result of that, we're sort of second tier in that critical path side of things. So fortunately, our business is allowed to continue to operate. And we have set in place a series of processes internally. We wipe every surface down within the factory environment every 2 hours. Social distancing, obviously, is a function of the day-to-day process in the business. Supervisors and our floor staff all work around these conditions. Our workplace meetings are held under those conditions as well. And just from an administrative and office perspective, I've currently got all of my sales team are remote. They're running from home, and we catch up and dial in a couple of times a day. It's just the way you've got to run your business. I think this is really going to redefine how a lot of business is done in Australia and perhaps globally in the coming months. It's certainly been significant. It hasn't impacted, apart from process and amendments to, I guess, the day-to-day functions that we interact with, managing the disinfecting side of things on a daily basis. Yeah, it's manageable, but it's different.
Yeah. I kind of wonder down the road, you might not see it right away, but given that so many stores are now using contactless transactions, so you use your PayWave credit card to buy it, and then most of the time now people are saying they don't want the receipt. So I'll be curious to see if that actually impacts you in terms of the amount of paper people actually need.
I don't like it when people say that, but I always take one, and I encourage my family to do that as well, and all of my friends, because it keeps me in a job. But no, I guess the reality is pay systems in this country are not yet perhaps as advanced as we might all like to think they are. But having said that, I'd have to say that there are also there needs to be recognition that a lot of what our banks have done in Australia is probably at the cutting edge of many other countries. They haven't yet agreed on a payment platform, and until such point in time as that occurs, then there is always going to be this discrepancy of, do I take a receipt? How do I actually prove this? Hey, what happens if the system goes down? Where do I get a copy of that payment process or that receipt for the payment? Yeah, it appears on your statement, but do you want to take your statement into the store and argue whether or not you paid for it on that date and by what process you paid for it? There are a lot of things about systems that are not yet foolproof, idiot-proof, and 100% guaranteed. The best alternative is to have a receipt.
Yeah.
I think the cash economy is certainly changing significantly. And, we talk about BPA being a contact. Think for a minute about the people who take those BPA-contained receipts, put them in their wallet alongside the cash notes that they're using. Every time they touch those notes, one of the biggest transmitters of BPA in a study that was done in the US last year was actually cash.
Oh, no.
There was more BPA contained on the cash that was being transmitted around the marketplace than there was on individual wallets or purses or whatever. And it was because of the fact that it's in contact with the paper when it's in someone's wallet or purse.
Wow.
So there's definitely a rethink on what happens with receipts. But the technology and the software platforms, are you a smartphone user? Does that platform work? There's several different things that will impact on that. But hopefully, I still believe, looking at the way the market's moved and has moved over the last 5-6 years, my feeling is that there's probably still 10 years worth of market space for a paper receipt as the best and only process. The other thing that comes into play there is the age of the population. My kids wouldn't know the idea of a receipt was. They don't like the idea because it's something else they've got to worry about. They just keep that on their phone or whatever else. But when the phone goes wrong or dies or they've got to replace it, then the world ends. But people my age and older tend to like the idea of the receipt, I guess.
Well, businesses still need it for the transactions as well.
There's definitely that.
Yeah. I want to talk more about your future plans because you did mention about a 10-year horizon there. But before we do that, Jon, can we just go back and talk a little bit about your own background? When I look at the company's history for Alliance, that a lot of the more environmentally friendly initiatives have happened during your time there. What made you so interested in producing products that were more environmentally friendly and also sourcing some that were too?
I always believe in honesty, so I'll answer that question honestly, as confronting as it might be. I had a personal battle with health about 6 years ago, and the impact of what caused my issue was directly related to exposure I had to chemicals in industry.
Wow.
And it changes the way you think about on your own mortality, but also the impact that you might have on other people and what else is being used in the industries that you work in and you're passionate about. I've been in printing all my life, and I guess that sort of did focus elements of what it was that we needed to change. One of the first things when I came to this company, as it is with every other company I've been to, we got rid of as many of the isopropyl alcohol-based products out of the manufacturing process as quickly as we could. It's a known carcinogen. There are several other things that are issues. But then we started to look further into what else was an impact, what was the risk to our staff, what was the risk more broadly. And then you can't help but sort of get caught up in why these things are important and how they need to change. And it might only be a small element of what's involved, but it's driven my focus on making sure that we do everything we possibly can and are responsible about that from both a trade-specific side of things, but also from the public perspective.
And from there, looking at the health focus at first, but obviously you've also looked at the environmental impact as well.
They flow from each other in my view. My brother's an environmental health specialist, environmental and health specialist, I should say. And, when you look at the impact that so many things can have, waste is always recognised, paper is always recognised as a significant contributor to waste. In the last 3 years, Australia has really had to take a good hard look at itself with exactly what it does with waste, how it treats waste, how it manages waste. And, we could not ignore that we're a contributor to that. Receipt paper, as it stands, photocopy paper, any of those office or commercial consumable papers do wind up ultimately in landfill. They're not going to China into waste management programs anymore, and all that stopped a couple of years ago. But it's been a growing problem. So I would be remiss as an MD if I wasn't looking at what is the impact that will ultimately have on our business. And I think we all have a responsibility to look at it and think like that. And I think the other thing that is interesting to just balance that a little bit is that 3 years ago when we were talking to our customers about what was happening and where the market was going, we were talking to procurement and purchasing people. We're now talking to sustainability people. And I think that's a big difference with the way our customers, we have more broadly business, is now looking at its responsibility, its role in part of this total package.
Well, we did an interview with Officeworks the other day on this show, and it was really interesting that Ryan, who is a former buyer, is now the director of sustainability there. So, yes, the two go in hand now. People in large businesses and small businesses are looking at their impact when they buy now.
Yep. And I would hope passionately that that level of energy, that engagement, and that more broad outlook, as well as an inward view, continues when the world settles back down to the new normality that is post-COVID-19. We've got an opportunity. We've seen a wave of change. Personally, we've probably seen a more significant push around this since November of last year. We felt to some extent that it was a bit of an uphill battle in the 2 years prior to that. Yep, everyone wanted to hear you, everyone wanted to talk about it, but no one actually wanted to do anything. And there now seems to be a greater level in the last 4 or 5 months. There's been a much greater level of uptake and engagement with being able to understand the expectation, input to how that can be managed within their particular business or environment, and then determine what are the solutions that exist and get on board with them. All of that slowed down, obviously, now with COVID-19, but I hope passionately that actually re-engages in the months ahead as things start to settle down back to whatever the new normality might be.
Well, I think one of the reminders to people is that while this eventually will settle, the plastic and waste issues that we see out there will still continue for centuries if we don't do something now about them.
Oh, yeah. And it's not, I was fortunate to be at the summit a couple of months ago in Canberra.
Me too.
And, look, that was a great, I didn't catch you there, I'm sorry. There were a lot of people there, and I'm sure you got the same sense of engagement that seemed to be prevalent across everybody that we spoke to. I met with people that I've seen before and dealt with before, and made some new contact. And in talking to them, it's been much the same noise that we've been getting, that I've been getting back, which is there is a level of engagement. We can't expect government to do this. Industry has to drive this. Industry has to own this. And that means that the sustainability officers and the procurement people, managing directors and CEOs, board members and shareholders all have to be engaged in making the change. And they have to recognise at some point that there may be a cost to do that, probably more so now than there was 6 months ago, courtesy of what we're dealing with on a global scale. But we have to look after our planet, we have to look after our local economy, we have to look after our local environment, and we have to look after our people. And every single one of those people in the buying process, the owning process, the paying process, all have to be engaged with that at a level. It's coming. It's going to take time.
Well, given that you're in the paper business, though, I'm really curious to hear, with that sustainable mindset that you have, it's still going to impact your business somehow. So what are you guys doing for the future? What are you thinking about in terms of future plans?
It's like any business, really, particularly in a service business where the product that you're delivering a service through has a finite life or has an applicable life that is determined by factors you can't control or influence. And we're clearly in that space. But it's as much about understanding the customers, it's as much in our view as determining what are the opportunities to broaden the offering. We are a paper converting company, and we've got millions and millions of dollars tied up in equipment that converts paper, but it doesn't have to convert paper. 10 years ago, this business was looking at converting plastic. We didn't go down that path. I wasn't involved at the time, but I'm very glad we didn't go down that path. But a substrate is a substrate, whether it's a piece of plastic or it's a piece of paper, or it's another product that has been developed out of a completely unique set of circumstances, like our barrier range, for argument's sake. Yes, it's a pulp product, but it's got a vegetable-based coating on it. There are ways and means of adapting machines and manufacturing processes to apply themselves to a multiple range of opportunities. It's a case of asking questions. It's a case of working closely with customers and with product development people, where what was perhaps a plastic product 2 years ago ultimately will be a natural product in 2 years' time. It's still going to need to be converted. So it's a case of being flexible. It's a case of being adaptable and being in conversation with people who are decision makers, are drivers of opportunity. And that sometimes means also being able to engineer or modify a machine because the cost of capital that's required these days and the return on investment that sits behind it is making it harder and harder for manufacturing companies to remain ahead of the curve.
There's so many businesses right now being impacted by this, the preventative measures around COVID-19, that a lot of them are already thinking about some sort of pivot anyway. And you see that with the distillers turning around and making hand sanitizer, or 3D printers suddenly making medical equipment.
Respirating devices. Yeah.
So you see that happening already. And I was just thinking that you guys might have to change your name. So it's not so paper focused, because as you say, the processes are very similar if you want to use a biopaper instead that is perhaps made out of wheat or seaweed or
hemp. I mean, there's nothing that stops it from being any of those product options. The papers that we're talking about in the Barrier, Nature and Guardian range, they're all water soluble. They'll break down in water. There was never a thought that those types of products would be part of our daily remit going back 5 years ago even. But that's the nature of the products we're dealing with. And these are all reflections of manufacturing at a raw material perspective, looking at what the market's demanding. And then as a converter, we're the middle guy that basically is able to add value to that product. But that means that's the other reason why we've got to talk to the customers, why we have to keep in contact with them and develop solutions that are applicable to their particular niche.
Yeah. I reckon, though, because of the fact that you're so interested and concerned about both the health and the environmental impacts of your own business, that you're probably a good 2 steps in front of most of your competitors who are still in denial that this is a problem. So, I reckon that you guys will probably be okay compared to some of your competitors because of that.
Oh, look, I'd love to take that to the bank, and thank you for that, Tammy. But I'd also have to say that one of the things that I'm continually reminded of is that imitation is the greatest form of flattery. Some of what we've done with pioneering the BPA and the push around the phenol-free has actually finally pushed our competitors to do exactly the same thing. And that's great, because the more of that product change that occurs, the better and healthier our customers, their customers, and the planet's going to be from what we can impact. So, yeah, we may not see the benefit from all that. Other people do within the industry. And they're probably watching what we're doing, and that's fine. That's okay, so long as they do it right.
Yeah, there's certainly some greenwashing in this space. So,
don't start me on that. I'm not allowed to talk about that. my staff and my board get annoyed when I get on the bandwagon about greenwashing, and there has certainly been plenty of it. And I just hope at some stage in the future, to be completely candid, I hope at some stage in the future, and perhaps this will come out of the post-COVID-19 days, that there's some naming and shaming, because what's occurred in several segments of market is just atrocious.
Yeah.
And it makes it hard for the consumer, the mum and dad out there, that is this a product that is really what they say it's going to do? Will it do that? Does it give me those benefits? There's a lot of misinformation, and people have made what they thought were right decisions when in actual fact they haven't been good decisions at all, because the information's been inaccurate.
Well, I tell you personally, just wanting to have this conversation with you was driven by your relationship with Planet Art, because they're a trusted brand in this space.
Absolutely.
And without that, endorsement of sorts, I wasn't sure if I should talk to you. So those kind of relationships where you have kind of a third-party endorsement do provide some certainty for people that want to make sure they're buying the right products and are doing the right thing for the environment, not just because people have it on their label, but because they've actually been tested.
Yeah. And that process has been integral to, we came back from looking at what was happening in Europe in 2017 and acknowledged that this was something that was much bigger than anything we'd looked at previously. And we put a specific strategy around it, and we talked about what that might look like and how could we get involved in that, what can we do. And it was funny because Planet Art was the first name that, floated to the top very quickly, and was the one that, from a perspective of engagement, was the most involved, and I felt added the most value to the opportunity of making this more publicly reached. Definitely a great organization there. And we've talked about them a few times. I'll have to get Paul, their CEO, on eventually onto the show. Oh, he loves a chat. But, Paul's passionate about his team and about what they do. And they've got some really, really good people in there. And one of the things that's made it easier for us has been the fact that we actually get to work with good people who've got similar values, similar outlooks, and very similar views. And, let's face it, you always work with people you like. You do your best work with people that are on the same page as you. So it's been a journey for a lot of my staff and my team to get engaged at that level, and it's a good working relationship. It sure sounds like it. John, do you have any advice or requests from our listeners? Buy Australian. Support Australian businesses. We are all going to need it. Manufacturing in this country is something that has unfortunately fallen by the wayside, and no single government can take full responsibility for that, or will. But what we've got to do now is, as collective individuals, demonstrate the support that is important and that we have to support Australian businesses that are manufacturing product in Australia. We can't all make product here, but we can certainly convert or prepare or value add to product in Australia that comes from overseas. What we've got to do is work out how we make sure that we can employ as many Australians and support those businesses as they recover. Many people are going to lose their jobs on a long-term basis. Older generation people are going to be out of comfort zone for a long, long while. And I think, if we all band together, it makes it a lot easier. I've always been a big supporter of manufacturing and passionate about that. But if I can ask anyone anything right now, it's make sure you keep buying Australian. I probably won't say any more than that because otherwise I'll get on that soapbox.
Or if you happen to be in the U.S., it's buy American, or it's basically buy local, right? You got to support the economy of your own country.
You do, and I will go so far as to probably step a little bit outside of the comfort zone for some people. The responsibility to support Australian manufacturing means you may have to pay a little bit more for it. But what that means is that you've also got to have CEOs, shareholders, equity structures, facilitators of funding and banking accept the fact that the return on investment, the profit and the dividend that they're going to take is perhaps not as high as it used to be. Build a bridge and get over it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you won't have a business and there won't be any revenue that goes back into the superannuation funds or that opportunity for another takeover of another multinational. The reality is big business needs to get on board with this as much as small business does. We deal with some of the biggest groups in Australia and we love that. But I'd be lying if I said they weren't hard work at times.
Yeah.
And I think, everybody would be of the same opinion that if we can all work together, that means we've all got to understand that there is a cost. But that ultimately, greed is good? Maybe. Not now. Not now.
Yeah. Well, I reckon from a full life or whole of cost perspective that businesses of all sizes should be looking at their risk profile. And that would include the benefits of buying Australian or buying local, wherever they might be, so that you're not at these risks when exports are suddenly dried up and you can't get your plane or ship here. There's certainly products that are part of my own line that are parts of the product that I can't get here in Australia. And I've tried to find local manufacturers, but the cost difference is so different that no one will even make it.
Yeah.
It's certainly understandable where you're coming from, but I hope that governments and businesses and consumers alike will recognize the value of buying local.
Oh, look, and the other side of that, you're absolutely right, Tammy. That not every product is going to work in that application. That's reality. And we do live in a global economy to a point. But the other thing is the duty of care. When it comes to BPA and phenol products, or phenol-free products, I should say, one of the things that is really important here is the duty of care as well. Knowingly buying a product and putting it into the application for your staff and your customers to have contact with, knowing that product actually contains something that is banned in Europe, is banned by the World Health Organization. Few people probably need to have a good hard look at themselves.
Sure. And I think this is probably a conversation with the WHS committees for all these major companies, because if they didn't know then and they're hearing this podcast for the first time, then they sure know now.
Ring us. We've got all the information and we can provide the chemical research studies as well. So
great. So if people want to know more about your business or you personally, John, what's the best way to reach out and touch you?
alliancepaper.com.au. We're on the web. Sustain Paper. If you're interested in looking at ways of using some of these new products for application into packaging and converting processes, we bulk supply. Happy to help. And there's years of experience and knowledge in our production people and our management team. They love having a chat about it. They're passionate about it. And if we can help, we will.
Well, thank you. I'll put that information into the transcript so people could find it easier. And John, I just wanted to thank you and your team for the work that you guys are doing. That passion you're talking about your team has, it certainly starts at the top. And it's obvious that, you had a personal experience that made you worried about your health and certainly the kind of industry that you're in, but you've also taken that to the risk to the environment. As you say, they go hand in hand, but a lot of businesses are still in your industry are trying to hold on to the past, where you're looking forward, you're starting to bring in new types of materials that can be substitutes for plastic and have a much better outcome for the environment, as well as even creating some closed loops for your own products. So really hope that this environmental change that we're seeing right now actually puts you in a really good position for new opportunities, because you guys are certainly looking at the holistic impact of your business and not just the bottom line. And if there's more businesses that do that, then it's certainly going to be better for everyone, including Australia. So thank you again for your work.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
And cheers, John. Thanks for joining me today on this podcast. If you want to see the links or to review any information we spoke about today, then check out our show notes on this channel or on our website, plasticsrevolution.com. If you found anything interesting or helpful at all, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to our show and to tell others. Stay tuned next week as I chat to another innovator, change maker, or fellow entrepreneur who is leading the plastics revolution. This is Tammy Ven Dange. Be kind to animals and Mother Nature.